Yeah.
This is my first in-person sermon talkback, so we were still maintaining. This is a far distance. I hope good for everyone.
Good.
But normally the way I start this out is, just to say who you are. Obviously, the people watching are going to know you, and then how they can get in touch with you during this time of distance, and just something that you've been doing before we get to Luke's sermon on silence.
Yeah, just feel free to call me on my cell number. As you know, I don't do a lot of email, but through Jan.
Yeah.
People email Jan Griffin, J Griffin. She's listed on our email list, and she passes all those on to me. And that's been really helpful because I've got some good suggestions about our worship, and I'm doing okay. The hardest part for me has been the loss of the incarnational piece of ministry, the people that have been going through very difficult hospitalizations, facing the loss of loved ones, and you're used to being right there beside those people.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of adjusting to that. There's been some positives, more time to read, reflect, be with my family. So this, like Patrick and I talk all the time. We're very seldom in the same space at all.
I know. I was thinking this is one of the first times I've seen Rob without the yellow box for Zoom around his face on a call for our Tuesday staff meeting. That's really the only way I see you, and then briefly on Sunday morning.
I had an earlier meeting, and I won't say who this came from in our church. It was a fairly small meeting today, and they did comment about my dress, and they said that they thought that I might fit in real well with the people that are maybe waiting for a food line today, are very hungry. They thought I would fit in very well with some of our folks that are having a hard time.
Yeah. See, I actually didn't wear a hat today. I washed my hair and tried my best to keep it under control. We're at 30 more minutes. It's probably going to be crazy because my wife made the same comment to me, like, hey, maybe if you're going up to church and you're going to be on camera, you got to get fully.
So this is my Wednesday dress. Now, if you see me on Sunday, I'll dress it up. I will look like your preacher on Sunday morning.
Well, before we get started, I first want to say one of the greatest joys since moving to Asheville has been becoming your friend and you being just a great mentor and friend to me and Hannah. Hannah was more jealous, I think, that I was going to get to come and see you face to face, and she wasn't. And just your leadership during this time is really, I know, made me feel safe is an interesting word, but also secure. You have a very calming presence during a tumultuous time. I know I speak for our congregation when I say that, but also just personally, I want to say thank you for that. And that means a lot. And I also want to say to you guys, the congregation, we get all of your handwritten notes as well. Yeah. And Rob does a really good job sharing those with us, and so does Leslie. And that's been something that's, right in my day.
That encouragement has really kept us going.
Yeah, it really has.
Right.
Well, this week, Luke preached, and it was a really great sermon. I had the Sunday off, but I still watched online and then rewatched. And it's been a new joy for me to go back and watch things again and see where we're moving and how we're kind of responding to the world, and also able to still express the ways that the Holy Spirit is moving and how we're experiencing it. And Luke kind of brought that to us with his talk about silence. And he made this really profound statement kind of early on in his sermon that I wanted you to kind of elaborate on. And he said, without silence, it is difficult to hear the longing of our hearts. I thought that was really profound. Without silence, it's difficult to hear the longing of our hearts. And I just wondered what you thought about that.
Absolutely. I think that silence is that place that creates, I'm going to call it the monastery in our own mind and soul. It helps our spirit catch up with us. We're like that proverbial rock skipping across the water. And when you slow down, you get still and you get silence. I think then, he used that phrase in the song, deep calls into deep. That's when sometimes you can get out of the shallow pool into the deeper pool. I love the image he showed of the Holy Land. Yeah. I've actually been to that place too.
Have you?
Yeah, and we often think of the lower part of Judah, Dead Sea and the arid, but up there in northern Galilee, particularly around Caesarea, there are these mountain streams that look exactly like our streams, and that waterfall, and that was. But no, I agree with that. I also like right in that first part, he made a really good point about silence can be threatening.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes we have felt that as ministers when you have the silent pause in a prayer and you're saying to yourself, how long can I get by with this?
Exactly.
And then I thought about my own life. I have to admit, there's been a lot of times when I've walked into a house by myself and the first thing I do is I flip something on.
Mm-hmm.
Piece of music, the TV.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
So I think there is this. We're driving in a car, and he was talking about using that
As time.
But what's the thing we often do?
Radio.
I
know that you and I both like sports talk or things like
Yeah.
that. I like to hear, what are the leagues going to come back, or instead of just taking that time to pause and reflect.
But back to the question you asked. Yes, I think if we don't have those places, we're not going to hear that deeper voice. And I think it is scary sometimes because the first voice you hear, you just silent, may not be real friendly.
Yeah.
It may feel like emptiness. It may feel like boredom even, or like there's something lacking. But what I say to people when they say, oh, I get silent, it just feels, and I say, well, you know what? Sometimes those things that we hear in silence at first, it's the sound God's voice makes when we're living as there is no God.
Wow.
So sometimes I have found if I listen to my emptiness, which I'm not sure I want to listen
Exactly.
to, my boredom, that's the first sign. What that really is a deeper longing. But I have to get past that emptiness. Oh, what is this really about?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a good thing. It's my deep calling into deep.
Yeah, no, that I can completely agree that there's that scary feeling that when everything stops, I might not like what's on the other end of the line.
Yeah.
And that leads me into what my second question was, is Luke went on to talk about, different places where silence was found. And he talks about a trip to Iona and Larry urging one of the pilgrims to, you're running everywhere, maybe take some silence. And I really found myself saying, this has been a good time, this kind of quarantine time to, in some ways I had to really face my own silence because I couldn't keep myself as busy as I wanted to with little tasks. But he makes the point that in the scripture, we see Jesus finding space for silence. And I wondered what you were saying, like what did Jesus experience when he was silent? And why did he constantly model that for us by going off to pray alone or trying to find ways to pull away just even for a pause? And do we often miss the silences of Jesus because we're looking so much for those red letters, the words of Jesus?
I've done I remember one time writing a piece or kind of an essay on what Jesus taught us about prayer. And interesting, when it comes to teaching about prayer, he gave us the Lord's Prayer. He has a couple of parables about keep throwing a pebble at the window to get the attention. Don't stop. Be importunate. Keep bothering God. God will bother you back. But there was very little quote teaching except through how he lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Luke picked up on that because if you go to the New Testament, go to the Gospels, there's several phrases you'll hear again and again. He went aside. He went apart. Mm-hmm. He went to the other side. He crossed to the other side of the lake. I would almost call it like, if you really study carefully in the Gospels, a pendulum principle. Mm-hmm. From action to inaction, back and forth, from heavy engagement to contemplation. It's like this pendulum that swung back and forth. And a couple of times the disciples even got irritated. Where are you been? We've been looking for you all morning. And he had gone aside. So yes, I think that was definitely, because we always think of his passionate engagement and involvement, and I think we miss out on those periods where he was willing to just be silent, be aside, be in prayer.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to the last quote I really wanted us to touch on, which is that Luke talks about Thomas Merton, the great Thomas Merton, the writer, and kind of beginning of these monastic movements. And he said a distraction during prayer is an opportunity to turn back. And I also had it brought to mind a quote from St. Augustine, who said, when he kneels down to pray, even the straw beneath his knees cry out to distract him. And I love that, because I'm someone that is very much easily distracted. But what does it mean then that this is an opportunity to turn back? And do we find those opportunities in silence, or is it ever hard for you to stay focused on a prayer?
Absolutely. I had this beautiful modeling of prayer life that I was not able to live up to, and that was this nightly image that I often saw when I would go into my parents' bedroom, and my father literally would get on his knees every night, and I had these bony knees, and, I would try that. I was so involved in how uncomfortable I felt, but maybe what I needed to do was listen a little more what Lucas was saying in that sense of daydreaming or wandering. Instead of feeling guilty about it, we just say, okay, God's calling me back. And a great word in how we live up our faith is returning. Metamorph, turn 180 degrees. I'm a little distracted. I'm too into what I'm going to be doing next, or thinking about, am I doing it the right way? And just stop that and say, reset, start over, let that call me back. And I think that's good. I think a lot of us have too much guilt around our prayer life.
Yeah.
And I know some people, when I've thought about and talked to people about prayer, they just say, I'm not innately a very contemplative person.
Yeah.
And I think some of us are wound differently. And I like when Luke got into the practical part of his sermon. I thought it was very didactic at the end.
Yeah.
He said, okay, I've been talking about this longing, this silence. Now here are some ways people, he was very real. He said, you don't have to start off with 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Do something that could work for you, and find a place where it could work. I like that. Like we all find our own altar.
Exactly.
It could be a backyard swing.
And I was going to say, I know you and I have talked about this. We've enjoyed seeing everyone's altar that they make for Sundays that we have communion, and finding that for yourself, whether or not it looks just like an altar or like a swing. I wanted to tell you this is, I love to hike, and I know that you do as well. And there's some days where I'm hiking and I just have my head down the whole time, and I'm just getting frustrated because I'm trying to connect with God. I'm trying to be silent. And I remember, the Psalm of Sense, I lift my eyes to the hills, and where does my help come from? And I'm like, oh, if I would just look up from this trudging up to the beauty around me, I might, that would be my altar to see that. So I was actually going to tack that onto the end about breath prayer. And that Luke is saying, you don't have to be perfect at it. And I find a lot of comfort in that.
Right. I think for me, a lot of times having a centering kind of scripture. I know several years during Lent, I would take, and he chose one that he gave us an example was Romans 8, which is one of my favorites. Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. So having this repeatable core praise that just is almost like that helps get it going. That's a starting place, and being able to say that over and over again. So it's not so much you're trying to make sense out of it. It starts making sense out of you.
I love that.
And it speaks back to you. But I really liked at the end, I think he gave us some ways and means where nobody has to feel like the kind of life that he was talking about in Life of Silence is just for the monastic few.
Yeah.
I thought he gave us all ports of entry into that.
I think so too. Well, Rob, I don't have any other questions.
All right. Oh, hey, I'll throw one back. Of those altars that you saw, did you have one that just kind of jumped out at you?
All the ones that were outside. Those really make me so happy, because I think about in the Old Testament, when a big moment in a life for someone like Moses, or they would take that time and immediately build an altar there. And so seeing the ones on people's porch, or out in the yard. To me, that meant that someone walked out there, that they were outside, they were, being creative, like, what is this that I could put here? And so I saw one or two outdoors that I really connected with, because it, to me, drew a through line back to, this is a point in time, this is a big moment for our church, but this is a big moment for people everywhere, that we're still connected, that we're still faithful during this. And so it was like a marker for that. And then another one, my mom and dad did one on our confirmation Sunday, or what would have been, and they used the cross that I had made in confirmation on there, that altar. Yeah, so
I didn't know that.
That was the cross I had painted when I was in 6th grade and did confirmation. And my mom had found it somewhere in my room.
Wow, what did that do when you saw that?
Oh, it was pretty cool. Mostly it was embarrassing because that cross it's a little interpretive, if you will, because I hand painted it. It's a little rough. But it was cool to see them participating along with us, and that really it was. I didn't even know they still had that, wow. And so that was made me happy, and it really made me long for that when our confirmands will be here, so that we can finish their journey.
And I think I saw this correctly. We were sitting there looking at these from a distance there, but I'm pretty sure I saw one toward the end. That the altar cloth, it was an outdoor one and was in the wind. You could see it. I thought this is like the breath of God coming. I thought that one really moved me.
Oh, I love it. And for the next one, I've been working on one out on our little hillside up there. So I'm hoping to have a good one before the next time, walking back and forth every time I take my dog, clearing out another space around it and then coming back. So,
I think there's something to be said about finding an altar, a place. We all have, like, I used to have this chair that I would sit in, outside, and when I would go to that chair, I would think of a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. That always spoke of that. I'd look forward to that. So if you could have a place that just being there, you anticipate again what's happened there, like prayer, so it becomes kind of your own sacred space. I think that's something to be said for that.
I think so too.
Hey, I've enjoyed this.
Me too. This is great.
Thanks.
Well, I hope to see you guys again next week. Rob, I'll see you on Sunday.